Happy Monday! Welcome to Quarantine Story Time. I'm Charlotte. I'm running late. And I'm here to bring you some more War and Peace until we are required to go outside. We'll be here reading this book. Should take us some time. Hopefully, hopefully it'll be fun on the way. Anyways, so thank you for joining me. Sorry I'm late. There was a really long line at the grocery store, and my shopping list was all out of order. But I got good things, so yay. Happy to be able to stay fed and make good food for those around me. Hey, Mom's here. Hi, Mom. Thanks for joining. She's used to me being late because it's been a long-standing family trait. Anyway, so we're on War and Peace. We're going to be doing sections 12 through 14 today in this version of War and Peace, which is written by Leo Tolstoy, and this particular translation is by Richard Pevear and Larissa Volokhonsky. So if you have it, you can follow along and criticize all my bad pronunciation. Let's see. A lot of intrigue going on. You know, there's the Countess's family, and that we've been kind of eavesdropping on their lives as they're having like a name day or like probably like birthday celebration sort of thing for the Countess and her daughter. I guess name day is different, but whatever. Is name day related to, does anyone know if is it related in Russia? Would it be related to like the feast of a specific saint? Or I would think so, like if you're, in this case, it's a Natasha, Natalia kind of situation. So your name day, you'd be celebrating like the day, the saint who had your same name, whatever their day is, I think. There's been a lot of gossip about the Count who might die, who's Pierre's father. Pierre's his bastard son, one of many evidently, but also his favorite. And there's talk about whether Pierre will inherit the fortune or the person Pierre's currently staying with, which is Prince Vasily, who is related to the Count via his wife, via Prince Vasily's wife, and so Prince Vasily might be angling for the money. Also, the little cousins at the Countess's, I forget what her name is. She's like the cousin of Anna Mikhailovna or something. But the kids and their cousins all have little like crushes on each other. Then there's the older daughter who like is just a snot. Was probably like raised differently than everyone else, and so has her own little attitude going on. But anyways, so let's jump back in. If you haven't, this is your first time, welcome. Since at some point it'll be really hard for me to recap everything that's going on, so you'll probably just want to maybe, I'll do a little recap at the beginning, and then you'll want to like maybe check out the playlist I have of all the other previous readings so you can catch up if you want. Otherwise, you could always just spark notes or, cliff notes what's going on. So we're still at the house of Countess Rostov, and her good friend and distant relative, I believe, Princess Anna Mikhailovna, who is actually quite destitute, is taking her son Boris to go visit this count Bazukov, I think, who's dying because there's some distant relative. Oh, I know, because Boris is his godson, so she's hoping that he'll help Boris out before he dies. So there's that. Let's see. Mom said, Russian name days are an interesting tradition with Christian origins and part of Russian culture. When a Russian person is named after a saint, he or she has the opportunity to, celebrate the day appointed for the saint in addition to a birthday. The name day is also called the Angel Day. Oh, okay. Thanks, Mom. Yeah, so that's kind of what I thought. It's not really their birthday, but it's another birthday like celebration. But it's related to if they have a name, if they're named after a saint. So the Saint's Day, so Saint Natasha's Day, whatever. They're celebrating this because the Countess and her youngest daughter are both have the same name as the saint. So yeah, thanks, Mom, for sharing that. If anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the live chat. And I don't look up once I start reading that much, but I will try to like keep an eye out. So if you have any questions, that sort of thing. And after the video is posted, there'll be a link to the playlist, or you can go to my channel and look for the War and Peace playlist for other of the readings. So without further ado, Section 12. Mon cher Boris, Princess Anna Mikhailovna said to her son when Countess Rostov's carriage, in which they were sitting, drove down the straw-laid street and into the wide courtyard of Count Kirill Vladimirovich Bezukhov. Mon cher Boris, said the mother, freeing her hand from under her old mantle and placing it with a timid and caressing movement on her son's hand. Be gentle, be attentive. Count Kirill Vladimirovich is, after all, your godfather, and your future fate depends on him. Remember that, mon cher. Be nice, as you know how to be. If I knew anything would come of it, besides humiliation, her son replied coldly, but I've promised you, and I'm doing it for you. Despite the fact that someone's carriage was standing at the entrance, the porter, having looked over the mother and son, who, without asking to be announced, had walked directly through the glass entryway between two rows of statues and niches, with a significant glance at the old mantle, asked whom they wanted to see, the princesses or the count, and on learning that it was the count, said that His Excellency was feeling worse that day, and that His Excellency was not receiving anyone. We can leave, the son said in French. Mon ami, the mother said in a pleading voice, again touching her son's hand, as if this touch would calm or encourage him. Boris fell silent, and, without taking off his overcoat, looked questioningly at his mother. Dearest, Anna Mikhailovna said in a tender little voice, turning to the porter, I know Count Kirill Vladimirovich is very ill. That's why I've come. I'm a relation. I won't trouble anyone, dearest. All I need is to see Prince Vasily Sergeyevich. He is staying here, I believe. Announce us, please. The porter suddenly pulled the bell rope that rang upstairs and turned away. Princess Dubretskoy to see Prince Vasily Sergeyevich, he called out to the servant in stocking shoes and a tailcoat who came running down and was now peering from the turn of the stairway. The mother soothed the folds of her re-dyed silk dress, looked in a full-length Venetian mirror on the wall, and in her down-on-heels shoes, went briskly up the carpet of the stairs. Mon cher, vous m'avez promis, she addressed her son again, touching his hand to encourage him. The son, lowering his eyes, calmly followed after her. They entered a large room in which one door led to the apartment assigned to Prince Vasily. As the mother and son reached the middle of the room, intending to ask their way from an old servant who had jumped up when they came in, the bronze handle of one of the doors turned, and Prince Vasily, in an informal velvet house jacket with one star, came out, accompanying a handsome, dark-haired man. This man was the famous Petersburg doctor, Lorraine. C'est donc positif, the prince was saying. Mon prince, erreur humaine est mais, the doctor replied, swallowing his R's and pronouncing the Latin words with a French accent. C'est bien, c'est bien. Noticing Anna Mikhailovna and her son, Prince Vasily dismissed the doctor with a bow and silently, but with a questioning look, came over to them. The son noticed how deep grief suddenly appeared in his mother's eyes and smiled slightly. Yes, Prince, we meet here under such sad circumstances. Well, how is our dear patient? She said, as if oblivious of the cold, insulting gaze directed at her. Prince Vasily looked questioningly, to the point of bewilderment, at her, then at Boris. Boris bowed courteously. Prince Vasily, without responding to the bow, turned to Anna Mikhailovna and replied to her question with a movement of the head and lips signifying the worst hopes for the patient. Can it be? Exclaimed Anna Mikhailovna. Ah, it's terrible. I'm afraid to think. This is my son, she added, pointing to Boris. He wanted to thank you himself. Boris once more bowed courteously. Believe me, Prince, a mother's heart will never forget what you have done for us. I'm glad that I could give you pleasure, my dearest Anna Mikhailovna, said Prince Vasily, straightening his jabot and in his gesture and voice displaying here, in Moscow, before the patronized Anna Mikhailovna, far greater importance than in Petersburg at Annette Scherer's soirée. Try to serve well and be worthy, he added, sternly addressing Boris. I'm glad. You're here on leave, he dictated in his passionless tone. Awaiting orders, Your Excellency, to be dispatched to my new assignment, replied Boris, showing neither vexation at the prince's abrupt tone, nor the wish to get into conversation, but so calmly and deferentially that the prince looked at him intently. You live with your mother? I live at the Countess Rostov's, said Boris, again adding, Your Excellency. It's that Ilya Rostov who married Nathalie Shinshin, said Anna Mikhailovna. I know, said Prince Vasily in his monotone voice. Je n'ai jamais pu concevoir comme Nathalie s'est décidée à sponsor cette ause malèche, un personnage complètement stupide et ridicule, et joyeux à ce qu'on dit. Mas très brave homme, mon prince, observed Anna Mikhailovna, smiling touchingly, as though she too knew that Count Rostov deserved such an opinion, but begged for pity on the poor man. What do the doctors say? The prince asked, after a brief pause, and again showing great sorrow. What do the doctors say? The princess asked, again after a brief pause, and again showing great sorrow on her weepy face. There's little hope, said the prince. And I wish so much to thank uncle for all his benefactions to me and to Borya. C'est son felu, she added in such a tone, as though this news was to make Prince Vasily extremely glad. Prince Vasily pondered and winced. Anna Mikhailovna understood that he feared to find in her a rival over Count Bezukhov's will. She hastened to reassure him. If it weren't for my true love and devotion to uncle, she said, uttering this word with a special assurance and casualness, I know his character noble and direct, but there are just the princesses around him. They're still young. She inclined her head and added in a whisper, Has he fulfilled his last duty, Prince? How precious these last moments are. It cannot get any worse. He must be prepared, if he's so poorly. We women, she smiled tenderly, always know how to say these things, Prince. I must see him. However hard it is for me, by now I'm used to suffering. The prince apparently realized, as at Annette's Scherer's soirée, that it was difficult to get rid of Anna Mikhailovna. This meeting might be hard on him, chérie Anna Mikhailovna, he said. Let's wait till evening. The doctors have predicted a crisis. But we cannot wait, Prince, at such a moment. Pensez, il y va du salut de son âme. Ah, c'est terrible les devoirs d'une chrétienne. The door to the inner room opened, and one of the young princesses, the count's nieces, came out with a cold and sullen face and a long waist, strikingly out of proportions with her legs. Prince Vasily turned to her. Well, how is he? The same, and like it or not, this noise, said the princess, looking Anna Mikhailovna over like a stranger. Ah, chérie, je ne vous reconnais pas, Anna Mikhailovna said with a happy smile, approaching the count's niece at a light amble. Je viens d'arriver et je suis à vous pour vous. Adieu et soyez mon oncle. J'imagine combien vous avez souffert, she added, rolling up her eyes sympathetically. The princess made no reply, did not even smile, and left at once. Anna Mikhailovna took off her gloves and settled into a hard-worn position in an armchair, inviting Prince Vasily to sit down beside her. Boris, she said to her son and smiled, I'll go to the count, my uncle, and meanwhile you go to Pierre, mon ami, and don't forget to convey to him the invitation from the Rostovs. They're inviting him to dinner. He won't go, I suppose, she turned to the prince. On the contrary, said the prince, now plainly out of sorts, Je serai très content si vous me débarrassez ce déjeuner home. He said, he just sits here. The count has never once asked about him. He shrugged his shoulders. The servant led the young man down and up another stairway to Pyotr Kirillovich. Pierre had not managed to choose a career for himself in Petersburg, and had indeed been banished to Moscow for riotous behavior. Oh, sorry, this is section 13. Pierre had not managed to choose a career for himself in Petersburg and had indeed been banished to Moscow for riotous behavior. The story told at Count Rostov's was true. Pierre had taken part in tying the policeman to the bear. He had arrived several days ago and was staying, as usual, at his father's house, though he supposed that his story was already known in Moscow and that the ladies who surrounded his father, always ill-disposed towards him, would have used this chance to rile the count. He nevertheless went to his father's part of the house the day he arrived. On entering the drawing room, where the princesses were usually to be found, he greeted the ladies who were sitting over their embroidery and a book, which one of them was reading aloud. There were three of them. The eldest, a neat, long-waisted, stern young lady, the one who had come out to Anna Mikhailovna, was reading. The younger ones, both red-cheeked and pretty, differing from each other only in that one had a mole above her lip, which was very becoming to her, were doing embroidery. Pierre was met like a dead man or a leper. The eldest princess interrupted her reading and silently stared at him with frightened eyes. The younger one, without the mole, assumed exactly the same expression. The youngest, with the mole, of a merry, laughter-prone character, bent over her embroidery frame to hide a smile, probably evoked by the forthcoming scene, which she foresaw would be amusing. She drew the woolen thread through and bent down as if studying the design, barely able to keep from laughing. Bonjour, ma cousine, said Pierre. Vous ne me reconnaissez pas. I recognize you only too well. Only too well. How is the Count's health? May I see him? Pierre asked awkwardly, as usual, but without embarrassment. The Count is suffering both physically and morally, and it seems you have taken care to cause him as much moral suffering as possible. May I see the Count? Pierre repeated. If you want to kill him outright, you may see him. Olga, go and see whether Uncle's bouillon is ready. It's soon time, she added, thereby showing Pierre that they were busy, and busy comforting his father, while he was obviously only busy upsetting him. Olga went out. Pierre stood looking at the sisters for a while, and bowing said, I'll go to my room then. Tell me when I can see him. He went out, and the ringing, though not loud laughter of the sister with the mole could be heard behind him. The next day, Prince Vasily came and settled in the Count's house. He summoned Pierre and said to him, Mon cher, si vous conduisez ici comme à Petersburg, vous finirez très mal. C'est tout ce que je vous dis. The Count is very ill. You must not see him at all. Since then, Pierre had not been disturbed, and he spent whole days alone upstairs in his room. When Boris came in, Pierre was pacing his room, stopping now and then in the corners, making threatening gestures to the wall as if piercing the invisible enemy with a sword, looking sternly over his spectacles, and then starting his promenade again, uttering vague words, shrugging his shoulders, and spreading his arms. L'Angleterre avec vous, he said, frowning and pointing his fingers at someone. Monsieur Pitt, contraire à la nation et en droit des gens se commander. He did not have time to finish Pitt's sentence, imagining that moment that he was Napoleon himself, and with his hero had already carried out the dangerous crossing of the Pas-de-Calais and conquered London before he saw a young, trim, and handsome officer come into his room. He stopped. Pierre had left Boris, a 14-year-old boy, and had decidedly no recollection of him. But despite that, with the quick and cordial manner proper to him, he took his hand and smiled amiably. Do you remember me? Said Boris quietly, with a pleasant smile. I've come to see the Count with my mother, but it seems he's not entirely well. Yes, it seems he's unwell. They keep disturbing him, Pierre replied, trying to recall who this young man was. Boris felt that Pierre did not recognize him, but he did not consider it necessary to give his name, and not feeling the least embarrassed, looked him straight in the eye. Count Rostov invites you to dinner today, he said after a rather long silence, which was awkward for Pierre. Ah, Count Rostov, Pierre began joyfully. So you're his son Ilya. Can you imagine? I didn't recognize you at first. Remember we used to go to the Sparrow Hills with Madame Jacot long ago. You are mistaken, Boris said unhurriedly with a bold and slightly mocking smile. I'm Boris, the son of Princess Anna Mikhailovna de Bretskoy. The Rostov father is called Ilya. The son is Nikolai. And I never knew any Madame Jacot. Pierre waved his hands and head as if he was being attacked by mosquitoes or bees. Ah, well, how about that? I've got everything confused. There are so many relations in Moscow. You're Boris, yes. So we finally straightened it out. Well, what do you think of the Bologna expedition? Won't the English be in trouble if Napoleon crosses the canal? Won't be the English be in trouble if Napoleon crosses the channel? I think the expedition is very important. If only Villeneuve didn't botch it. Boris knew nothing about the Bologna expedition. He did not read the newspapers and was hearing about Villeneuve for the first time. Here in Moscow, we're more taken up with dinners and gossip than with politics, he said in his calm, mocking tone. I neither know nor think about any of it. Moscow is taken up with gossip most of all, he went on. Now the talk is about you and the Count. Pierre smiled his kindly smile, as if fearing that his interlocutor might say something he would then regret. But Boris spoke distinctly, clearly, dryly, looking Pierre straight in the eye. Moscow has nothing else to do but gossip, he went on. Everyone's concerned about whom the Count will leave his fortune to, though maybe he'll outlive us all, which is my heartfelt wish. Yes, it's all very painful, Pierre picked up. Very painful. Pierre kept fearing that this officer would accidentally fall into a conversation awkward for himself. And it must seem to you, Boris said, blushing slightly but without changing his voice or pose, it must seem to you that all everyone is concerned with is getting something out of the rich man. Here we go, thought Pierre. But I precisely wish to tell you, so as to avoid misunderstandings, that you are greatly mistaken if you count my mother and me among those people. We are very poor, but I can speak for myself at least. Precisely because your father is rich, I don't consider myself his relation, and neither I nor my mother will ever ask for or accept anything from him. Pierre could not understand for a long time, but when he did, he jumped up from the sofa, seized Boris' arm from below with his peculiar quickness and awkwardness, which turning much more red than Boris, began speaking with a mixed feeling of shame and vexation. How strange! Did I ever? Who could think? I know very well, but Boris interrupted him again. I'm glad I've spoken it all out. Maybe it's unpleasant for you. You must excuse me, he said, reassuring Pierre instead of being reassured by him. But I hope I haven't offended you. I make it a rule to say everything directly. What shall I tell them, then? Will you come to the Rostovs for dinner? And Boris, obviously relieving himself of a painful duty, getting out of an awkward situation himself, and putting another man in one, again became perfectly pleasant. No, listen, said Pierre, calming down. You're a surprising man. What you just said is good, very good. Of course, you don't know me. We haven't met for so long, since we were children. You may suppose that I understand you very well, and I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have courage enough, but it's beautiful. I'm very glad to have made your acquaintance. It's strange, he added after a pause and smiling. What you supposed of me, he laughed. Well, so what? We'll become better acquainted, if you please. He shook Boris's hand. You know, I haven't once been to see the Count. He hasn't sent for me. I pity him as a human being, but what to do? And you think Napoleon will manage to send the army across? Boris asked, smiling. Pierre understood that Boris wanted to change the subject, and agreeing with him, began to explain the advantages and disadvantages of the Bologna undertaking. A lackey came to summon Boris to the princess. The princess was leaving. Pierre promised to come for dinner in order to become closer with Boris, pressed his hand hard, looking him affectionately in the eye through his spectacles. After his departure, Pierre spent a long time pacing the room, no longer piercing the invisible enemy with a sword, but smiling at the memory of this nice, intelligent, and firm young man. As happens in early youth, and especially when one is alone, he felt a gratuitous tenderness for this young man and promised himself to be sure to become friends with him. Prince Vasily was seeing the princess off. The princess was holding a handkerchief to her eyes, and her face was all in tears. It's terrible, terrible, she was saying, but whatever it costs, I will fulfill my duty. I will come to spend the night. He can't be left like that. Every minute is precious. I don't understand why the princesses keep delaying. Maybe God will help me find the means to prepare him. Adieu, mon prince. Que le bon Dieu vous soutienne. Adieu, ma bonne. Prince Vasily replied, turning away from her. Ah, he's in a terrible state, the mother said to the son, as they were getting back in the carriage. He hardly recognizes anyone. I don't understand, Mamma. What is his attitudes towards Pierre? Asked the son. It will all be spelled out in the will. Our fate, too, depends on it. But why do you think he'll leave us anything? Ah, my friend, he's so rich, and we're so poor. And that's still not enough of a reason, Mamma. Ah, my God, he is so ill, the mother exclaimed. Section 14. When Anna Mikhailovna and her son left for Count Kirill Vladimirovich Bezukhov's, Countess Rostov sat for a long time alone, putting her handkerchief to her eyes. Finally, she rang. "What's wrong, dear?" she said crossly to the girl, who made her wait a few minutes. "You don't want to serve me? Then I'll find another place for you, miss." The countess was upset by her friend's woes and humiliating poverty, and was therefore out of sorts, which always expressed itself in her calling the maid dear and miss. "Beg pardon, ma'am," said the maid. "Ask the count to come to me." The count, waddling, approached his wife with a somewhat guilty look, as he always did. "Well, my little countess, what a sauté à medire of hazel grouse will have, mon cher. I sampled it. Not for nothing did I pay 1,000 rubles for Taraska. He's worth it." He sat down by his wife, resting his elbows dashingly on his knees and ruffling his grey hair. "What are your orders, little countess?" "The thing is, my friend—" "What's this stain you've got there?" she said, pointing to his waistcoat. "Must be the sauté," she added, smiling. "The thing is, Count, that I need money." Her face grew sad. "Ah, little countess," and the Count began fussing, pulling out his wallet. "I need a lot, Count. I need 500 rubles." And taking out a cambric handkerchief, she began rubbing her husband's waistcoat. "Just a moment. Hey, you there!" he cried in a voice such as people use who are sure that those they call will come rushing to them. "Send Mitenka to me." Mitenka, that nobleman's son, brought up by the Count, who now managed all his affairs, came into the room with quiet steps. "The thing is, my dear," the Count said to the deferential young man, as he came in. "Bring me," he pondered. Yes, 700 rubles, and see that you don't bring torn and dirty ones like the other time, but nice ones for the Countess." "Yes, Mitenka, please be sure they're clean," said the Countess, sighing sadly. When shall I bring it, Your Excellency?" said Mitenka. "Allow me to tell you that. However, please don't worry," he added, noticing that the Count was beginning to breathe heavily and quickly, which was a sign of incipient wrath. "I almost forgot. Shall I deliver it this minute?" Yes, right. Bring it. Give it to the Countess." "He's pure gold, my Mitenka," the Count added, smiling when the young man went out. "Nothing's ever impossible. I can't stand that. Everything's possible." "Ah, money, Count. Money, there's so much grief in the world because of it," said the Countess. "But I need this money very badly." "You, my dear wife, are a notorious spendthrift," said the Count, and kissing his wife's hand, he went back to his study. When Anna Mikhailovna came back from Bezukhov's, the money was already lying by the Countess, all in new notes under a handkerchief on a little table, and Anna Mikhailovna noticed that something was troubling the Countess. "Well, my friend?" asked the Countess. "Ah, he's in such a terrible state. You wouldn't recognize him. He's so poorly, so poorly. I stayed only a minute and didn't say 2 words. "Annette, for God's sake, don't refuse me," the Countess said suddenly, blushing, which was quite strange with her thin, dignified, and no longer young face, taking the money from under the handkerchief. Anna Mikhailovna instantly realized what it was about and bent forward as to embrace the Countess adroitly at the right moment. "This is for Boris from me, to have his uniform made." Anna Mikhailovna was already embracing her and weeping. The Countess was also weeping. They wept because they were friends, and because they were kind, and because they, who had been friends since childhood, were concerned with such a mean subject, money, and because their youth was gone. But for both of them, they were pleasant tears. And that is the end of section 14. So I think I'll leave it there for today. We'll probably do another few sections again tomorrow, probably closer to 3 o'clock. I have no errands tomorrow. All at your discretion. So rather interesting. Countess seems quite sweet. Not sure what I make of Anna Mikhailovna, but Boris seems like a nice young man. Good character. I like his straightforwardness, even though if he is a little bit, kind of uses it a little bit to put people ill at ease. There was something else I feel like I wanted to mention, but I don't remember. Thank you all for tuning in. Come back tomorrow, 3 p.m., my channel, for more War and Peace. Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.